June 23, 1942, RAF Pembrey, South Wales. The ground crew at the small coastal airfield freeze as the unmistakable roar of a radial engine cuts through the morning air. The sound is wrong. Too guttural, too powerful to be one of theirs. Flight Sergeant Jeffries drops his wrench and runs toward the control tower, his eyes scanning the gray sky. Then he sees it descending through scattered clouds. The blunt nose, the wide-set landing gear, the brutal angular wings. A Focke-Wulf 190, the newest, deadliest fighter in the Luftwaffe arsenal, the aircraft that has been slaughtering Spitfire pilots for 11 months, and it's landing at their base. Jeffries watches, paralyzed, as the German fighter touches down smoothly on the rain-slicked runway. The BMW 801 engine bellows, then quiets to a rumble. The propeller winds down. For a moment, nothing happens. Ground crew members emerge from hangars, uncertain whether to run or reach for weapons. The canopy slides back. A young German pilot climbs out, looks around with evident confusion, and raises his hands. He's wearing the uniform of a Luftwaffe Oberleutnant. His face shows not defiance, but bewildered shock. Oberleutnant Arnim Faber, 25 years old, adjutant of the 3 JG2, has just made the most catastrophic navigational error of the war. Minutes earlier, he'd been celebrating shooting down a Spitfire over the English Channel. In the chaos of the dogfight, disoriented after a victory roll, he'd mistaken the Bristol Channel for the English Channel. He thought he was landing at his base in occupied France. Instead, he delivered Hitler's newest fighter directly into British hands. Within hours, intelligence officers arrived from London. They circled the aircraft like archaeologists discovering an intact pharaoh's tomb. For 11 months, RAF pilots had been dying in encounters with this revolutionary fighter. They'd reported impossible performance, acceleration that left Spitfire standing still, firepower that shredded aircraft in seconds, a roll rate so violent it seemed to defy physics. And now, through one pilot's fatal mistake, the British had captured one intact. Air Vice Marshal Sholto Douglas, Deputy Chief of the Air Staff, understood immediately what this meant. The Focke-Wulf 190 had been terrorizing fighter command since September 1941. Pilots who survived encounters described an aircraft that seemed a generation ahead. Some claimed it was faster than the Spitfire. Others said it climbed like a rocket. All agreed on one thing. When a 190 appeared, your chances of survival dropped dramatically. The psychological impact had been crushing. Squadrons reported pilots who froze at the first glimpse of that distinctive radial engine. But Faber's blunder had handed the RAF something more valuable than gold. They would take this aircraft apart, test it, learn its secrets, discover its weaknesses, and most importantly, they would answer the question that haunted every Spitfire pilot over occupied Europe. How do you fight something that seems unbeatable? The captured FW-190, coded MP-499 by the RAF, was loaded onto a truck under armed guard. Its destination was the Air Fighting Development Unit at Duxford, where test pilots would push it to its absolute limits. What they would discover would shock everyone involved. The legendary Spitfire, symbol of British defiance, defender of the realm during the Battle of Britain, was comprehensively outclassed. In almost every measurable way, the German fighter was superior. The question facing the RAF was simple but terrifying. How long could Britain survive when the enemy's fighter was better than yours? To understand why the Focke-Wulf 190 struck such terror into RAF pilots, you must understand what came before. The story begins 3 years earlier when Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. Summer 1940, the Battle of Britain. Reginald Mitchell's Spitfire had achieved near-mythical status in those desperate months. The sleek fighter with its distinctive elliptical wings had helped turn back the Luftwaffe's assault on Britain. German pilots learned to respect it. Some learned to fear it. The warning, Achtung Spitfire, crackled over Luftwaffe radio frequencies so often, it became bitter joke among German fighter pilots. When asked by Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring what he needed to win the battle, Ace Adolf Galland famously replied, "I should like an outfit of Spitfires for my squadron." The response left Göring speechless with rage. The Spitfire represented everything the Luftwaffe hadn't expected. Its turning ability was supernatural. Its grace in combat was legendary. Powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin III engine producing 1,030 horsepower, The Mark I could reach 362 miles per hour and climb at 2,490 feet per minute. Armed with 8 .303 caliber machine guns, it possessed the firepower to shred German bombers. More importantly, it could outmaneuver the Messerschmitt Bf 109 in turning combat. But Mitchell never saw his creation's finest hour. He died of cancer on June 11, 1937 at age 42. The brilliant designer from Stoke-on-Trent had created 24 different aircraft designs, but only one would achieve immortality. His death came less than a year after the Spitfire's first flight. He never knew that his aircraft would help save Britain from invasion. By mid-1941, RAF Fighter Command had settled into confident dominance. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park's tactics during the Battle of Britain had proven devastatingly effective. His 11-group squadrons had developed the doctrine that would govern fighter combat for years. Intercept early, attack aggressively, preserve your force. The Spitfire Mark V, entering service that spring, seemed to extend British aerial superiority indefinitely. It featured a more powerful Merlin 45 engine and improved armament options. Then, on August 27, 1941, everything changed. RAF pilots over France reported encounters with a new German fighter. The description seemed impossible. Radial engine, unlike the inline engines of the 109. Exceptionally fast in level flight and dives, armed with cannons that could destroy a Spitfire with a handful of hits. Most disturbing, it could dive away from any pursuit and accelerate faster than anything the RAF could field. Within weeks, the reports became a flood. The new fighter was appearing in greater numbers. RAF loss rates spiked alarmingly. Pilots who'd been confident veterans suddenly sounded shaken in debriefings. Something fundamental had shifted in the air war over Europe. Statistical analysis told a grim story. In encounters between Spitfire Mark I's and Focke-Wulf 190s, British losses were running at nearly 2-to-1. Wing Commander Robert Stanford Tuck, 26 years old, one of the RAF's leading aces with 29 victories, expressed the growing fear. The 190 changed everything. It was faster, it hit harder, and when the pilot wanted to leave, there wasn't a damn thing you could do to stop him. The psychological impact spread like a virus through fighter command. Young pilots, barely trained, heard stories of the invincible German fighter before their first mission. Some froze in combat. Others refused to engage when they spotted the characteristic wide-set landing gear and radial engine. Morale was cracking. The Spitfire, which had saved Britain, suddenly seemed obsolete. Before we continue, I'd love to know. Did you know that a navigational error gave the Allies their biggest intelligence breakthrough of the air war? Drop a comment below and let me know if you've heard this story before. If you're enjoying this level of historical detail, please subscribe to the channel. These deep dives take serious research, and knowing you're out there makes it all worthwhile. On July 13, 1942, Faber's captured Focke-Wulf 190 arrived at Duxford. Test Pilot Squadron leader Rupert Lee, 31 years old, a veteran of the Battle of Britain with 12 kills, approached the German fighter with professional skepticism. He'd heard the stories. He'd lost friends to this aircraft. Now he would discover whether the rumors were true. The first shock came before he even started the engine. RAF intelligence officers had measured everything. The aircraft was a masterpiece of brutal efficiency. The BMW 801D2 radial engine generated 1,700 horsepower at takeoff, significantly more than the Spitfire's 1,440 horsepower. That power difference meant everything in combat. The 190 could accelerate away from danger. It could climb rapidly to advantageous positions. It could turn superior speed into tactical dominance. Lee fired up the BMW engine. The roar was visceral, animalistic. He taxied to the runway, applied full power, and felt the fighter surge forward with shocking acceleration. Within seconds, he was airborne. The rate of climb stunned him. Where a Spitfire Mark V climbed at roughly 2,800 feet per minute, the 190 was exceeding 3,000 feet per minute. In combat, that meant a German pilot could climb out of trouble, reset the engagement, and attack from above before the British pilot could react. Level speed testing revealed more disturbing truths. RAF pilots had reported the 190 was faster. They were right. At low altitude, the German fighter reached 352 miles per hour at sea level. The Spitfire Mark V managed only 324 miles per hour. At medium altitude, around 20,000 feet, the 190 hit 408 miles per hour, while the Spitfire struggled to match 370 miles per hour. That 38-mile-per-hour advantage was the difference between life and death. A German pilot could engage or disengage at will. British pilots had no choice in the matter, but the most terrifying discovery came during high-speed dive tests. Lee pushed the 190 into a steep dive and watched the airspeed indicator climb past 450 miles per hour. The aircraft remained rock-solid, controllable, stable. He'd seen Spitfire pilots die attempting such dives. The British fighter's controls became dangerously heavy above 400 miles per hour. Wings had failed under the stress. German pilots exploited this ruthlessly. Dive away, accelerate beyond pursuit, escape to fight another day. The roll rate proved equally devastating. Lee threw the 190 into a maximum rate aileron roll. The world spun with sickening violence. The aircraft completed the roll in less than 2 seconds. A Spitfire needed nearly 3 seconds for the same maneuver. In a twisting dogfight, that difference meant a German pilot could reverse direction, get on your tail, and kill you before you completed your defensive turn. Squadron leader Bob Spurtle, a New Zealander with combat experience against both 109s and 190s, tested the captured fighter and summarized the findings in his report. The Focke-Wulf 190 is superior to the Spitfire Mark V in speed at all altitudes, rate of climb at all altitudes, acceleration in all flight regimes, and firepower. The only advantage we retain is turning radius, and exploiting that requires the enemy pilot to accept turning combat. The armament disparity was particularly sobering. The 190 carried 2 7.19 mm machine guns in the nose and 4 20mm cannons in the wings. Those cannons fired explosive shells weighing 4 times more than British .303 machine gun bullets. A single cannon hit could cripple a Spitfire. A 2-second burst could saw an aircraft in half. British pilots reported seeing Spitfires explode from brief contact with 190 gunfire. Wing Commander Hugh Dundas, 23 years old, commander of 56 Squadron, had survived multiple encounters with Focke-Wulf 190s. He was invited to Duxford to observe the testing. Watching the captured fighter tear through the sky, he later wrote, "Seeing our limitations demonstrated so clearly was devastating. We'd believed the Spitfire was the finest fighter in the world. Now we understood why so many of our boys weren't coming home." The engineering analysis revealed sophisticated design decisions. The 190's wide-track landing gear made it stable during takeoff and landing, reducing accidents. The cockpit was spacious and comfortable, reducing pilot fatigue on long missions. The electrical trim system allowed precise control adjustments in combat. The powered controls remained effective at high speeds, where Spitfire controls became almost immovable. German engineers had created not just a fighter, but a weapons system optimized for killing. Most troubling was the aircraft's versatility. It could fight at any altitude. It excelled at low-level attack missions. It could carry bombs for ground attack. It could intercept bombers or dogfight with enemy fighters. The Spitfire, designed specifically as an interceptor, couldn't match that flexibility. The AFDU testing concluded with a comprehensive report that sent shockwaves through fighter command. The document was classified top secret and distributed only to senior commanders. Its conclusions were devastating. Current RAF fighters could not compete with the Focke-Wulf 190 on equal terms. Tactical doctrine must change immediately. New aircraft were urgently required. Air Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory, commander of Fighter Command, convened an emergency conference. The captured 190 had revealed weaknesses that could be exploited, but they required significant changes to British tactics. First, exploit the Spitfire's superior turning ability. German pilots confident in their speed advantage would sometimes accept turning combat. In those circumstances, a skilled Spitfire pilot could win. Second, never allow a 190 to dictate engagement terms. Attack with altitude advantage, attack with numerical advantage, but never attack alone or from below. But tactical changes weren't enough. Britain needed a fighter that could match the 190's performance. Fortunately, one was already in development. The Spitfire Mark IX, designed as a stopgap measure, featured the new Merlin 61 engine with a 2-stage supercharger. This engine generated 1,060 horsepower, finally matching German power levels. The Mark IX entered squadron service in July 1942. The same month Faber delivered his 190 to the British. Initial production was slow, with only a handful of squadrons equipped by autumn. But the new Spitfire proved transformative. It could match the 190's climb rate. It came close to matching its speed. Most crucially, it restored parity. On July 30th, 1942, a Spitfire Mark IX of the Special Service Flight scored the variant's first victory over a Focke-Wulf 190. The German pilot, accustomed to superior performance, attempted to dive away. The Spitfire stayed with him. The psychological impact on Luftwaffe pilots was immediate. Their advantage had evaporated. Production ramped up rapidly. By early 1943, multiple squadrons flew the Mark IX. Combat reports showed the shift. Loss ratios against the 190 moved from 2-1 in Germany's favor to roughly even. German pilots began reporting with frustration that British fighters could now match their performance. The hunter had become the hunted. The captured Focke-Wulf also influenced broader strategic thinking. Its analysis demonstrated that German engineering was exceptionally advanced. Underestimating the enemy was potentially fatal. This insight drove accelerated development of the Spitfire Mark XIII, with the powerful Griffin engine, the Hawker Tempest, and eventually the first British jet fighters. Tactical lessons spread throughout fighter command. Training squadrons used the captured 190 to teach recognition and combat techniques. Pilots learned exactly what the German fighter could and couldn't do. They practiced against it in mock combat. The mysterious, terrifying enemy became understood, quantified, defeatable. Group Captain Douglas Bader, the legendary legless ace, flew the captured 190 and emerged with newfound respect. It's a bloody good aircraft. Fast, powerful, well-armed, but it's not invincible. Every aircraft has weaknesses. Our job is finding them and exploiting them. The intelligence breakthrough extended beyond tactical considerations. Engineers studied the 190's construction techniques, learning how German designers achieved such impressive performance. Some innovations influenced future British aircraft design. Others revealed German limitations, particularly in materials and manufacturing capacity. By late 1943, the Luftwaffe's qualitative edge had disappeared. Improved Spitfires, American P-51 Mustangs, and better-trained pilots turned the air war over Europe into a battle of attrition Germany couldn't win. The 190 remained a dangerous opponent, but it no longer dominated the skies. The long-term consequences of Faber's navigational error rippled through the remainder of the war. The intelligence gained from MP-499 accelerated British fighter development by months, perhaps years. Those months translated directly into saved lives. Hundreds of RAF pilots who would have died in unequal combat against the 190 survived because their Spitfire Mark IXs could compete. Strategic bombing campaigns against Germany might have failed without this breakthrough. Heavy bombers required fighter escort deep into German territory. Without fighters capable of matching Luftwaffe performance, bomber losses would have been unsustainable. The captured 190's analysis helped ensure that when American bombers struck industrial targets, their escorts could protect them. The Focke-Wulf 190 itself evolved throughout the war. Later variants featured more powerful engines, improved armament, and refined aerodynamics. The 190D9 Dora, powered by an inline Junkers Jumo engine, was arguably the finest piston engine fighter Germany produced. But by then, the Allies had learned all the 190's secrets. Each new variant faced opponents designed specifically to counter its strengths. Production numbers tell the strategic story. Germany produced approximately 20,000 Focke-Wulf 190's in all variants. Britain produced more than 20,000 Spitfires in late war marks alone. American factories added tens of thousands of fighters to Allied strength. The industrial balance overwhelmed any German technological advantage. What became of the people involved? Oberleutnant Arnim Faber spent the remainder of the war as a prisoner. He was repatriated to Germany in 1947, where he lived quietly until his death in 1975. He never spoke publicly about his famous mistake. Fellow German pilots reportedly treated him with a mixture of sympathy and contempt. His single navigational error had handed the Allies one of the war's greatest intelligence coups. Squadron leader Rupert Lee, the test pilot who first flew the captured 190, survived the war and continued test flying until 1952. He flew nearly every significant Allied and captured Axis aircraft of the war. In later interviews, he maintained that the FW-190 was among the finest fighters he'd ever flown. He died in 1987 at age 76. Wing Commander Hugh Dundas went on to command several squadrons and wings. He survived numerous close calls with German fighters, including several encounters with Focke-Wulf 190s after his visit to Duxford. He wrote extensively about his wartime experiences. His memoirs provide some of the most vivid accounts of what fighting in inferior aircraft felt like. He died in 1995. The captured Focke-Wulf 190 MP499 had an interesting fate. After extensive testing at Duxford and the Royal Aircraft Establishment, it toured various RAF stations for training purposes. Pilots throughout Fighter Command got to see and sometimes fly the enemy fighter that had terrorized them. The psychological value was immense. In late 1943, the aircraft was retired from active testing. It was eventually scrapped, its intelligence value exhausted. Historical assessment of the Focke-Wulf 190's impact has evolved over decades. Early post-war histories often downplayed its significance, focusing on the Spitfire's symbolic importance and the Messerschmitt 109's higher production numbers. More recent scholarship recognizes the 190 as potentially the finest overall fighter of the European War. Its combination of speed, firepower, ruggedness, and versatility was unmatched. Military historians now understand that the 190's appearance in 1941 represented a critical inflection point. Had Germany been able to exploit its superiority for longer, the air war's outcome might have changed significantly. Faber's mistake, delivering an intact example to the British, accelerated the Allied response by perhaps 6 months to a year. In a war where timing was everything, that acceleration may have been decisive. The story also illustrates the limits of technological advantage. The Focke-Wulf 190 was objectively superior to the Spitfire Mark V in almost every measurable way. Yet Britain survived and eventually won the air war. Superior numbers, better tactics, improved training, and most critically, the ability to learn and adapt faster than the enemy proved more important than any single technological edge. Adolf Galland, who rose to command all Luftwaffe fighters, reflected in his post-war memoirs, "The 190 was the finest fighter I ever flew, but we could never produce enough of them. We could never train enough pilots to fly them effectively, and every time we gained an advantage, the Allies found a way to counter it." By 1944, we were drowning in their numbers. The Spitfire's evolution tells its own story. From the Mark I that fought in the Battle of Britain to the Mark 24, with its massive Griffin engine and 5-blade propeller, the basic Mitchell design proved endlessly adaptable. More than 20 major variants entered service. Total production exceeded 20,000 aircraft. It served on every front, in every role from fighter to reconnaissance to carrier operations. But perhaps the most profound lesson emerges from comparing the psychological impact each aircraft had on its opponents. In 1940, German pilots learned to fear the Spitfire. Achtung, Spitfire! Meant danger, meant British fighters with superior turning ability and determined pilots defending their homeland. By 1942, that fear had transferred to the Focke-Wulf 190. RAF pilots dreaded the blunt-nosed German fighter that could outperform anything they flew. By 1944, with improved Allied fighters and overwhelming numbers, the psychological advantage had shifted permanently. June 23, 1942. A confused German pilot mistook one channel for another and landed at the wrong airfield. That simple error, that moment of disorientation after a successful dogfight, changed the air war's trajectory. Intelligence officers got their hands on the enemy's most advanced fighter. Test pilots learned its secrets. Engineers studied its innovations. Tacticians developed counters. And hundreds of Allied pilots lived because their commanders understood exactly what they were fighting against. The lesson echoes through military history. Knowledge is the ultimate force multiplier. You can have the best equipment, the most advanced technology, the most powerful weapons, but if your enemy understands your capabilities better than you understand theirs, if they learn faster and adapt more effectively, technological superiority means nothing. The side that learns faster wins. In the end, the Spitfire made the Luftwaffe tremble not because it was always the best fighter. It made them tremble because British designers, engineers, and pilots never stopped learning, never stopped improving, never stopped adapting. From Mitchell's original design to the final Griffin-powered variants, the Spitfire represented something more powerful than any single aircraft. The determination to match the enemy's innovations and exceed them. That determination, more than any elliptical wing or Merlin engine, was what the Luftwaffe truly feared.